Hey, good morning, everyone. We're gonna start here in just a little bit, few seconds. Thank you for coming over. Good morning, Monica. You're in Tampa. Thanks for joining, and thanks everyone else. So today we are going to continue our discussion on instant response as a whole for cybersecurity. And last time we talked about processes and policies and whatnot. Today we're going to talk about a key part of this the instant response, which is preparation, which has to do with a lot with how you're going to respond. So in this session for Friday morning coffee thoughts, we're going to talk a lot about running tabletop exercises and what you need to know, what to prepare for, what to ask for when you are and doing a tabletop exercise. So, like going through a fire drill, an instant response, testing your instant response is very important for any organization of any size to understand whether they will be able to respond to a cyber incident before it happens. You run tabletop exercises, fire drills all the time when we were in the office, and many are back now. We will run a fire drill every year at least, in some cases every quarter, and they have some purposes, right? Just for you to understand where to go if something happened. So here's the same: by testing your instant response tabletop exercise, you want to ensure that you have key roles and responsibilities assigned, that everybody that is part of the team understands and have knowledge of your instant response plan. You build responses and communications strategies, and you also identify, of course, and address gaps that you find during the drill. So there are a couple of different, I'm pulling my notes, so bear with me too there. But there are a couple of things that you should always do when preparing for these exercises. So, but first, I want to touch on a couple of different type of exercises. One is the traditional tabletop exercise, which is scenario based, right? Is usually you go through some sort of slide deck with and scenarios are being presented to you. The second and most modern type of exercise, and which is gaining traction these days, and it should, is the running the exercise using attack simulation. Now, which one is right for you? Well, there's a lot of variables there to make that decision. Number one to me is whether you've done this before or not. If you've never done a tabletop exercise, technical or management level, then you should um, really focus on the traditional maybe, because you want to make sure that everybody understands and it's not very difficult. The tax simulations are great, but they are more technical. So that's again one criteria is, have we done this before? If you haven't, then start with the traditional. If you have done a few times, maybe it's time for you to do something more real, and the team is prepared for that. Now, if you have only IT and you have done this before, again, maybe focus on attack simulation based tabletop exercises. Otherwise, keep it traditional. And regardless of whether the last criteria here, regardless of whether you've done this or not before, and you have management involved, or there is a portion of the exercise with management, then you definitely want to stick to the traditional and not make it technical, because they during a real exercise, these folks really don't, the management team, the executive, they don't focus on the details, on the ground people working on an attack, real attack. They want to be at a higher level. So again, your criteria is: have we done this before? Is this IT only, or is there a component also that where you're going to bring executives and management? So that's the type of exercises. So today we're going to talk more about the traditional scenario-based exercises, and what you're trying to do is create an opportunity for the company and stakeholders to enhance their understanding of all the issues that are around incidents that can impact the business, including coordination and information sharing among all the internal and external parties that are going to respond, right? So then, really very important part of this is that you set up a scope and objectives for the exercise. Um, First, let's start with objectives and what are you trying to achieve. This is not, I'm not talking about is my EDR or detection and response mechanisms, is my CrowdStrike, my Microsoft Defender, my Sentinel working, or is my firewall working. That's not your objective. Your objective should be around understanding your how your organization creates, reviews, and implements your policies and plans and your procedures, your playbooks too. Another objective is to examine the ability of your instant response team to respond to these events, right, as they happen. Another one will be exploring the interorganizational information sharing, communications, and collaboration between all different business units, how they escalate issues, how they make decisions. That's very important. What is the decision making process? Another goal is perhaps improving the understanding of what these decisions, critical decisions, mean, what type of impact they have on the business. All right. I have a question from Kate on what I consider or we consider traditional tabletop exercises, and maybe you missed that earlier, but it, traditional is scenario based, right? We're going to present scenarios that are plausible, and they are presented as they happen. So you go through, hey, you know, ransomware note displayed in the screen. Now, what do? You don't actually simulate the attack, which is the other type, is a simulated attack. So, so those are the objectives, again, around communication, collaboration, how people work together, and how people make decisions. Now, the scope. One of the things that you want to consider is what type of threat you want to test. Um, you should do this by understanding, of course, your organization, your security controls stack, but also you should understand your industry where you are in. There are threat adversaries there that focus on certain industries, and that's important because you will have more information about those folks. Another thing, within the scope and objective that you need to consider is whether you are going to be running this yourself versus bringing in a third party. I've done this internally, and I never liked it because I'm supposed to be responding as the leader of the team. Whereas if I bring someone from outside, and it could be, I'm not saying necessarily a vendor, but it could be maybe your internal audit team, for example, or your process improvement team. They can run it for you. And they have other functions too that I'm going to touch on later. So make sure you understand who is going to run it, and then discuss these objectives and scope with them. Who should participate? So the way we recommend doing this is breaking it up in two parts. The first part is to basically have the operational incident response team be part of the exercise, the people on the ground, the people hitting the key on the keyboard, the people doing the investigations. And of course, that should be all laid out in your incident response plan, as we mentioned last week. And then you want to under make sure that they have the plan in front of them, right? So they can follow it and they understand their responsibilities. Remember, these are scenarios that are plausible, and the events occur as they are presented. So they should have all their documentation so they can respond to those. We have a question here from Monica that says, "How do you begin an exercise like this, and would it affect the whole company like a real attack?" So that's a great question. So the way we recommend starting the exercise really is by restating the goals and objectives of the exercise. This is a scope. This is what we're testing. We are going through the policies and procedures. We're going to see how you work, collaborate, and work together, right? And then in terms of what impact they have, well, no, you don't really have that. If you're running the traditional exercise or the simulated attack, you shouldn't be impacting the company, right? The impact is on more on people and their thinking, their process of how they're going to make decisions. Help them prepare for that. You also want to present some assumptions and artificialities, like whoever is running the exercise shouldn't have a hidden agenda. They shouldn't be trying to make you fail and trick you. Should be very clear. Everybody should be receiving the information at the same time, and again, um, not trying to make you fail. Instead, the role of the moderator is to poke you, to ask key questions so you can think and see how you're going to respond. The role of the moderator is also to help you draw from your previous experience. You've gone through this before, some of your people, but and also another key role of the moderator is to help people feel comfortable to participate, right? And for them to provide ideas. Every idea is valid, and that the moderator should be able to make you feel comfortable and help you find solutions. And for the participants, this is very important. A key role is to not critique the exercise. I've been in many exercises where people have very good controls and they respond saying, "This is not going to happen here because we have this tool." We understand that. We know that. But guess what? Your adversaries, the attackers, also have those tools in their labs. They know how to get around it. So it just may happen. And when you look at some of the recent events that are happening out there, these are companies that have very good controls. So it just may happen. Controls fail. Um, so in terms of the participants, again, you have the technical team. They're going to be responding to the scenarios you present as you go. But then the second part should be the executive team, the management team. Now, in both type of scenarios, there may be people from executive and management interested in being the technical part too, and that's okay. If they want to take that as an education, things may be over their head, but that is okay if they see this opportunity as an education, and that's what this is really. So make sure that, but regardless on whether it's a one session or different sessions, make sure folks from legal, from management, from communications, are involved. Think about bringing in your third party SOC if you have one. I've done that successfully where we had a third party SOC and we told them we're going to do this and we want you to be there. And it was a great experience for everybody. Maybe think about asking your insurance provider if they want to be part of it, if they can. Those are questions for you to answer before the exercise when you're going through the logistics. I was in one exercise, for example, where they have an FBI agent in there, and that's a great way to build a relationship. He was actually participating. He was actually very good to have there. Everybody appreciated that. We have another question here. In terms of time, how long does a tabletop take? This was a former FBI special agent, and they had annual exercises, which were very complex and took place for over a week. Okay, so that's a great question, and I appreciate it. And I think the length of the exercise depends on your scope and objectives, right? And the type of threats you are going to be running. But I don't, and that's why I mentioned, well, we can break it down in a couple of sessions. I think a good, in average, what we've been doing, and we've been doing a couple of these every month, is a couple of hours. I mean, sorry, 3 to 4 hours for the hands-on, not hands-on, but the operational team to go through it. We usually stay around 3 hours, top four. But then for the executive team, first, it's going to be hard to be there for a long time. So I think 2 hours is the sweet spot for that. We've done it in an hour, and then we get feedback saying, "Oh, this was great, but we really needed more time." Whereas, they're not going to stay there for more than 2 hours. So I think try to get 90 minutes or 2 hours from your executive, and you're going to be great. And if you're doing it in one day, they don't have to be there for the whole thing. They can come in later when you tell them when to. Uh, so that's what I have for today. Uh, we talked today about the differences between traditional scenario based tabletop exercises and more technical, modern tabletop exercise using attack simulation. Today, we focus on the scenario based and the roles and responsibilities. Next week, we're going to just start with that a little bit and then go into attack simulation exercises. Today, we talk about objectives. Make sure that you have clear objectives so everybody understands what they need to do. We talk about what type of threats you're going to run, focusing on your industry and organization. And then we talk about the roles and responsibility, the type of participants that should be on your exercises. Next week, we're going to talk about attack simulation. We're going to talk about third-party incidents. That's very important. And we're going to talk also about what you get out of this. Your reports, your observations, your prioritization. One more thing here, one more question. How often should a company be doing these exercises? That's a great question. A lot depends on the maturity of the company. At least annually, at least once a year. That's a minimum you should do. Remember, this is like doing a fire drill. So fire drills happen at least every year. You should, and in some cases quarterly. Same approach. You want to practice these things. You want to tweak. You have to find ways to improve your plan and be prepared. So I would say at least once a year, and teams that are more mature can do it at least twice a year. In my last enterprise role, we were trying to get to twice a year. But I've worked with companies and clients that do it quarterly. So at least once a year up to quarterly. That's what I would say. Well, thank you for joining me this morning on Friday Morning Coffee Thoughts, and I see you next week.